Team. Doug, thank you very much. And we have some breaking news here. NBC has now called New York for Vice President Kamala Harris. Again, NBC projecting New York, and its 28 electoral votes will go for Kamala Harris. This might be a good time to zoom out and take a look at the full electoral map, because we are starting to see some of the board get shaded in here. We'll punch that up on the screen in just a moment here, but also a good time to bring in our very savvy political experts, Mark Roundtree.
Who's also busy punching up their own numbers.
Yeah, this is a number-heavy, data-heavy, fact-heavy panel, and that's the way we like it. You see the map right now, the electoral map. Importantly, all of the states you see, if you're watching at home, all of the states you see shaded in that yellow border, those are the battleground states. And it does not take a political expert to realize none of them have yet been called. We do have two political experts, though. Fal, what are you watching in the battleground states tonight?
Yeah, I'm watching, I said this earlier, I'm watching Arizona. I'm particularly interested in the Latino vote out in Arizona. We saw kind of a new breath of momentum towards the Harris campaign after the Madison Square Garden rally. I'm interested to see how that comment about Puerto Rico plays out in the states in the West that have a significant Latino population.
Mark, how about you?
I'm actually looking at the U.S. Senate races and how they are relating to the presidential race. It's been interesting as, for example, as Ohio has moved further and further over into safe Trump territory. He'll win Ohio tonight. The question is whether Moreno can beat U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown. And it's starting to look like the numbers are there for that seat to get flipped in the U.S. Senate, which really will strengthen Republican hands in the U.S. Senate if that were to happen.
And that's such an evolution for Ohio. You look at Ohio, yes, and you look at Florida, that used to be the bellwethers. You remember the late, great Tim Russert with the whiteboard saying Florida, Florida, Florida. Now, early call on Florida, and you're suggesting that Ohio is pretty safe territory as well.
It looks that way.
Also, speaking to the trends that analysts have been predicting or seeing, that Republicans could take the Senate. We know that the seat held by Mr. Manchin will likely go. And then the question is, can Democrats potentially take the House with that flip? So it'll be interesting to see. Another thing that we are seeing out of an NBC exit poll, nationwide polls state that democracy and then economy, the most important issue for voters. And I think that speaks to something that we have been hearing from voters on both sides of the aisle. I would say more so when I'm at the Harris campaign, the rallies, I do hear democracy is on the line. We want to take our country back. Democracy is on the line. Both sides of the aisle, I'm hearing about economy. I'm hearing about the cost of goods. The prices are too high. The vice president acknowledging that, saying that that's part of her to-do list, one of the top things on her to-do list to get that down. Of course, former President Donald Trump with his no taxes on tips, saying that my policies are going to change while Harris's policies are going to keep us the same way that we've been for the last 3 years. So I'm curious to know, just from your polling, Mark, and your observations, Fal, democracy, economy, is that what you're seeing at top of mind for voters as well?
That issue, when spoken by Harris, only plays to her base, and they eventually got away from that as a marketing message. For 6 weeks, they kind of used that message over and over, and they found that it really wasn't working with undecided voters and independent voters. And in fact, she was losing ground until the final weeks of the campaign, and then they sort of transitioned over to this, Trump is a fascist, Trump is a Nazi thing, and that didn't work really either. Where she started to do better was in the final 7 days of the campaign. She did have an upswing at the end when she started focusing back on the economy. She got away from doing celebrity events with Beyonce and Cardi B, and she started doing man on the street events in the final 7 days. And that's when she tipped up. If she wins this election, it will be that last minute strategic choice on their part. And I think that was a smart decision.
I'd also argue that her rhetoric changed a little bit, like you were saying, going from the talk of a fascist to now just a talk of joy, and saying that this is our fight for freedom, that when we fight, we win.
They were finding that it was, I don't mean emotionally depressing, but it was depressing her own potential vote, that they need a big turnout at the Harris campaign. And it was getting people in this negative mode about the campaign, and they were concerned that people weren't going to vote. There is some evidence that in some places that may not have been turned around in time, but we'll see.
And we do have to go to one of our reporters, but just a quick note from you, Fal, before we go out.
No, I think that the issue of democracy is very important on the ballot. I think it takes multiple factors to get to 51%, right? The economy being number one, and I think that, like what Mark was saying, that she leaned into it in the last week, and that has paid dividends at this point. But I think that, especially the Democratic base, they were very concerned that, they didn't forget the images of January 6th.
Yeah.